Are you willing to enrich your organization with the best qualified and most creative talent you can find? Yes or no? Mindset number 5. Empower people. Highly qualified people are very independent and don't easily conform to bureaucracies. Are you willing not to micromanage people? Are you willing to recruit employees with multiple talents and give them the freedom to produce results their way? Yes or no? Mindset number 6. Reinvent yourself. In today's world, people are no longer staying in one job for life. They may have as many as 3 careers and 7 or 8 different jobs. Are you yourself willing to keep getting the education and training you need to synchronize yourself with the demands of an ever-changing world? Are you willing to keep reinventing yourself? Yes or no? Mindset number 7. Embrace technology. There is no escaping the impact of technology on the success of every organization. But there is a big difference between, say, buying a computer and being connected to the internet and looking for ways to enhance the very structure of how you do business through technology. For example, for all practical purposes, networked technology can do away with the need for almost any organization to have to be physically located in one place. Are you willing to embrace technology as an essential ingredient in the future success of your organization? Yes or no? Mindset number 8. Don't be afraid of failing. Too often, people speak the words, "If at first you don't succeed, try again." But they don't really mean them. Employees feel pressured always to succeed at all costs. Yet how can they learn unless they try, fail, and learn from their mistakes? Are you willing to entertain the idea that without failure, there can be no meaningful success? Are you willing to give everyone in your organization a license to fail? Yes or no? Mindset number 9. Be prepared to move on. Are you willing to face the fact that what may be best for you professionally and financially may be to keep moving from opportunity to opportunity rather than to get stuck in one organization? Are you willing to move on? Yes or no? Mindset number 10. Be prepared to stand alone. Are you willing to create an organization that does its own thing no matter what others are doing? Can you have the personal and organizational independence to follow your own course of action without seeking approval or validation from others? Are you and your organization willing to lead? Yes or no? How many yeses did you score? Compare your score with your earlier personal change quotient and your organizational change quotient? Are you turning out to be more willing to change than you appeared to be at the start of the program, or not? Are you pleased with any progress you are showing? Now that you know where you stand in terms of change, and in terms of the 10 mindsets on synchronization, we can explore how to create the synchronized organization in the second segment of today's program. But first, let's talk together about how change and synchronization work in light of what I have already said. I'm especially interested in knowing how you rated in the 3 exercises we have done. How did you rate your personal willingness to change and your organizational's willingness to change? How did you measure up in terms of your willingness to adopt the 10 mindsets that pave the way for synchronization?
Let's begin with the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first telephone call is from Colombia. It is from the Federación Nacional de Comerciantes, known as FENALCO, in the city of Medellín in Colombia.
Good morning. Thank you. Our question is the following. The prospecting allows us to visualize desirable futures. How can we integrate this concept to the one of synchronization in the organization? So visualizing, visioning.
Well, it's actually essential. That is, when you talk in terms of a future, visioning for the future, what you have to be careful about is that you are not just visioning, but you are creating something that has a likely possibility of succeeding. To be visioning may be to go so far in the future that you don't reflect what is possible in the present and achievable in the future. In other words, what you want to do is have a vision that is grounded in possibility and that evolves. But you can't just have a vision. If you have a vision, you may be at a distance from what people can accept and see as possible.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mexico. It is from the Dirección General de Educación Tecnológica Industrial, CETIS number 3, in Mexico City, Mexico.
Yes, good morning. We are here in Veracruz in a CONALEP site, and some of the teachers from different educational institutions are here from the state of Veracruz, Mexico. Our question is, what would be the way to proceed in order to act when the organization is not ready for change, when we have leaders who are already not updated, who are older, and who have a lot of barriers for change? In what way can we convince these other generation leaders, the people who are from the baby boomers generation and people in general, to be able to allow us to generate the change? Like, for example, we have docents who have mental blocks to change. So thank you very much, and greetings to all of you.
Thank all of you for coming together for today's program. I have to laugh for a moment when you suggested that the baby boomers were the older generation, because there was a time when the baby boomers were considered the younger generation, and so there's a little, for me, a kind of irony in that people would look upon baby boomers as older. But that is exactly the point of today's program, that everyone and everything eventually grows older and must make way for new concepts. But the thing is not to look upon it as a one-time thing. To go back to your question, how do you get people who may be fixed in their ways to accept change? As I said at the beginning, what Heraclitus said is often repeated but not understood. The only constant is change. You can't make change once and then get stuck in it. You have to be open at all times to changing. That's why I asked you the questions that I did about driving to your place of work, how you style your hair, how your organization behaves, because we get into ruts. People by nature do not want to change. You will find in the next segment of today's program exactly how to implement change. That is the synchronization formula. It is based on what I said at the beginning when Mr. Page asked me the first question. There's an art to it and there's a science to it. The generations that you want to see change are people. At the same time, they occupy roles in an organization. At the same time, they relate to the world outside of them. So the clue to understanding how you get people to change is to get them to understand that the purpose of any business, any agency, any organization is to serve the outside world. Organizations must reflect what is going on around them if they are to survive.
Thank you, and I am going to take the liberty of making a very quick editorial comment. As a fellow baby boomer with Dr. Goldstein, the willingness to accept change and the ability to incorporate change is not necessarily a function of your generation. There are people in their 50s and 60s and 70s who accept change better than people in their 20s and 30s. So do not give up on your older bosses, on your older managers. There are those among them who will accept your suggestions for change and will welcome them. So having said that, our next call is from Mexico, from the Instituto Politécnico Nacional Educación Continua in Mexico City, Mexico.
The question is the following. In the bureaucratic structures that are defined, how can you change things without getting into conflict or without having to go around institutional changes or avoid them?
Well, the important key is to find information. The first way, the first strategy, simple strategy for effecting change is to find something that is so compelling that people cannot avoid recognizing that unless they take advantage of it, they are going to be harmed. What I mean by that is, if you work in an organization and you are serving a certain population, and you discover, because you have researched it, research is the key, really, if you're looking for a baseline. How do you start? You start with the best possible information you can get. And if you come within a bureaucracy and say to people, look at the facts that I have found. This population that we are not serving needs us. This population that we are now serving is changing in this way or has these kinds of needs. The important thing is to tie change initially to indisputable or highly reliable information. From that, you can then help people to change their minds. Most of the time, people come with something that is emotional, and they don't tie it to sufficient data and information on the outside. So that would be a first key. You will really, I hate to say again, as I said before, you will see more of this in the second segment of the program, but you will see that. There is a 12-step process that I actually take you through to implement synchronization in an organization. But I will tell you ahead of time, the first key to it is research and data.
Thank you. We have another call from Mexico, this time from the Universidad Liceo Cervantino in Irapuato, in the city of Irapuato, in the state of Guanajuato, in Mexico.
Buenos días. After assuming changes in an organization, what is the time that you have to allow for the new systems to evolve and mature? And at what point should we apply this new change?
This will sound perhaps the most difficult to accept, but you must always be assessing what you are doing. What you have just pointed out is precisely the pitfall that most people get into. They assume that there is a period called finding out what we need to do, doing it, and then finding out when we need to change again. What you need, I think, to understand is that the process of change is continuous. That you make a change is simply a period, a given act at a certain time. But you must always be assessing the effectiveness. Now, sometimes people, and I think this is your point, sometimes people make a change and then they say, oh, it's not working for us, and they make another change thinking that they're going to recover from that. Those parameters, those measures can only be determined by you within your organization. And you must ahead of time be able to recognize whether it's dollars, whether it's number of people served, whatever the parameters for success are for you, below which you would not wish to go. And then you would be implementing a new change. But the important thing is, it is constant. You must always be looking to see how you can improve it, how you can fine-tune it. It never stops.
Thank you again from Mexico, this time from SADE, Aguascalientes, SC, in the city of Aguascalientes, in the state of Aguascalientes, in Mexico.
Good morning. The question is the following. Within the change, the organizational change process that exists, what is the formula or the way to be able to control, as you were saying, or as we were just commenting, between the different generations? Because there are generational gaps and there are different criteria depending on the generation to solve problems. Is there a way to harmonize this and to make this a continuous improvement process? Thank you.
You've put the emphasis on the people within your organization, and that tells me that if I were to ask all of the people here who are viewing, just from the questions that have come in thus far, I'm going to guess that maybe your organizations did not rank very well on the scale of how willing they are to change. My sense also is that since a number of you have suggested that your organizations may not be willing to change so much, but you are, that you might have ranked higher in your degree of flexibility than your organizations do. Now, if you remember what I said before, the emphasis should be outside your organization. That is, on defining what it is your population, your audience, the people you serve need and want. That is a basic marketing assumption. You're going to give people what they need and want ethically and productively. So for a moment, forget about whether you think person X in your company or organization is inflexible, or somebody else like Mr. Page is highly flexible and open-minded. And look at the outside world to get the first cue. Then see yourself as the person who brings that information in, and whether somebody is a baby boomer or older or younger, as Mr. Page indicated before, there are young people who are inflexible and older people who may be open-minded. That is not the issue. The issue is first get the cue from the outside world.
Dr. Goldstein, do your principles apply any less to Generation X or even the younger generation, Y, or whatever you would call it, as opposed to the baby boomers who are now more in the leadership positions?
Not at all. They apply to everybody. They're universal. They don't apply to people who are of one age group or another. They are because, as I said before, they relate to researching, sensitizing people to the demands and needs of the outside world.
Thank you. Next we have a fax from the Universidad Tecnológica de Panama in Panama City, Panama. It returns to the distinction between art and science, which Dr. Goldstein has discussed somewhat, but asked the following question. I know that you've said synchronization is an art and a science. Can you please tell us the difference between them?
Well, the art of synchronization really focuses on people. If I were to say that is the first distinction, you heard in the first series of questions that I asked you, we were talking about, the questions were about you as change agents and your organization, whether it was willing to change or not. Now, there is no absolute science to that. You're dealing with individuals. You are dealing with different cultures. You're dealing with every person has his or her own demands and requirements. You're dealing, take for example, a family business or organization. You know that if you are involved in any smaller enterprise like that, that there is an art to dealing with every single member of your family. There is also a science that I've referred to before, the information gathering, the ability to understand trends, the kinds of things that you would consider solid finance and other business practices. So in terms of differentiating between the two, there are some things that you would call the way you go about doing a good job, and 1 and 1 is 2. There's nothing artful about that. That is mathematical, if not scientific. But The question to answer is, if 1 and 1 is 2, and that's a matter of science, do we want to add 1 and 1 in the first place? What are we going to do with 2 once we get it? So the decision-making process, which is based upon gathering information, is, for example, the art. Any 2 people, any 3 people, 4 people looking at the same body of information can come to different conclusions about what they're going to do with that. So it is a balancing act, but and there is a great deal of personality involved in it. The importance is getting people to agree on the core matters of science, information, data, and so on, and drawing conclusions that you can support.
Thank you. Next we have a question from Mexico. It's from the Universidad de Sonora. It's in the capital city of Hermosillo in the state of Sonora in Mexico.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Greetings to the whole network of the ITC, and congratulations to Dr. Goldstein for the interesting topic he's bringing to us here today. I would like to ask the following, or it's a comment. It's very interesting for us to measure ourselves and know how open we are to change. In fact, I do also feel that in addition to knowing where we are on that scale as to openness to changes, I think that what we have to develop today is perhaps a competency that enables us to take advantage in a more efficient way of the opportunities that change offers to us and to be able to get out of critical situations. The question would be, in that respect, to what kind of capabilities and skills do we have to develop in order to acquire this competency? How can we train to be more efficient in detecting and taking advantage of the opportunities that change brings? So how do I train for this?
That's a great question, because that goes back to our dichotomy again of the art and the science, that's how we started off with that first question. That's why I said Mr. Page asked the right question at the very beginning. And by the way, those of you who call in or fax in your questions in the future, I would be interested, as part of our discussion, in knowing how you and your organizations fared, how you scored on those questions. If you'd like to share that information, that might be an interesting thing for me to weave into my answers. You remember when I said which of the competencies, the mindsets that you need to adopt to synchronize your organization. One of them I said was, of course, flexibility, and I also indicated that it was important for companies, organizations, to find people, to hire people, to groom people, to have the most number of skills. So the first baseline is, and I even said, and I think I say it later in the program as well, for example, everybody in an organization that is looking to have global success should automatically assume that they have to know 2 languages. That's a minimum threshold, minimum. And I don't care whether somebody's in the United States or somebody's elsewhere around the world. That's not just competency, that is automatic. Now, what does that mean? That means that people are able, if somebody says, you know, I think we can open up a market for our goods or services in an English-speaking country, that a person can automatically go there. Automatically, not who do we have to look for. We know we have a large number who can, and vice versa if somebody is in the United States or wherever. So that's automatic, and many people, particularly in the United States, for example, don't have that competency. We have fallen down in that. Clearly people need, as a baseline, knowledge of what you would call popular technology. anything associated with the world of technology that facilitates business today. And I'm not just talking about having a knowledge of word processing or something else, but a real sensitivity to the degree to which technology can empower individuals to function within an organization. And what I mean by that is that very few entities, organizations, businesses, individuals really take advantage of how individuals can be empowered to function within their organization from anywhere in the world. From anywhere in the world. You know, any one of us could sit here, could walk out of this studio and instantaneously be in touch with our email, instantaneously be in touch with our clients anywhere in the world, and during the course of a day don't even have to be physically located with anyone else with whom we work. That is a very threatening thing for organizations that want to kind of, you know, look and see that somebody's here from this hour to that hour. So technology, language and communications in general, what you would call basic research tools that allow you to, you don't have to be a researcher, you have to understand research, something that gives you a solid base from which you can determine the data and information to make decisions.